Hi guys, I'm going to show you today how to reduce the width of a lap panel. So either we can use the old-fashioned handsaw, which is the slower way and sometimes going to be a bit more tricky, or the power circular saw with the depth set, with it unplugged, set the depth of the blade there to just a little bit more than the maximum thickness of the thickest part of the fence panel that you're cutting, and then that'll go through all of it quite happily. So the next thing is to carefully measure the size of the fence panel that you want to end up with. So measure that in at least 3 places, and then use maybe a piece of batten, or if you've got a 6-foot steel spirit level, even better, get a more accurate feel for it. So we're just going to measure that and draw a line to saw to. The first thing is to cut a piece of batten for both sides of the panel, which will end up as your edging strip. Then you can use those as a guide to help you mark the line on for you to saw to. This one today is a tantalised batten. You can see that in the camera, 19 by 38 mil. That's ideal for what we've got to do here. The gap between the bottom and the top of the panel are different on each side, so don't cut them exactly the same length. Cut them to the length appropriate to the side that you're fitting the piece of battening to. You can use your saw as a useful set square. It either does 90 degrees or 45-degree angles. I'll use the 45 there or 90 degree there, or even the 90 degree there. So just going to draw a line there, then we'll saw that through. As you can hopefully see, we've sawn that batten to the correct length and placed it in the position of our the marks that we've got on our boarding, which is down here somewhere. The screen's upside down compared to where I'm looking at the panel, so get the lines marked, get the batten all in line with the marks, and then draw our straight line to saw to. Now the first way to saw the panel is with the handsaw, and just to hold the panel towards you and just to cut down the line. But as you will see as I show you the demonstration, that the laps all jump about and they clog the saw up and stop it, bind it and make it difficult for it to saw. But I'll show you just to give you an idea of how difficult it is. Now hopefully you'll see as I cut down through it how these wobble about and grab the saw and make it difficult to cut. Start at the top, which is the easier bit. And that bit cuts fairly easily because it's got the strength of the bits of batten either side of the lap. But then as we go on a bit, you'll see clings onto and binds onto those laps, so that makes it very difficult to cut. And even if you angle the saw down at a shallower angle like that, it makes it slightly easier, but it's still quite difficult. And also quite dangerous. But we'll carry on doing that on the ground and see if it gets any better, but I don't think it will. Oops, sorry. Just apologising to the tripod now. Oops. So now we're going to cut it with the handsaw again, but this time on the ground and holding the different laps down, and then it stops it spraying around so much. So that's worked better than I thought, by pressing down on the laps as you come to the panel. Best to wear your gloves just in case your having a drop. Your saw slips, and that seems to actually be working much better than I'd thought, so I've just proved myself wrong. So this is the first option for cutting the panel, and I'll show you another two. Right, we've now lined up the batten along the edge of the panel, and now we're going to screw with 40mm screws, or basically something that won't go through the batten and the boarding and out the batten the other side and sticky outy, so make sure you don't get anything too long. Then we're going to screw this one batten to the batten, which will miraculously appear on the other side of the panel. And bear in mind, as I said earlier, that the panels are slightly different. Gaps between those bottom rail and the top rail. So bottom rail down here, and the top rail up there. Sorry, my screen is in a different position, it's back to front. Hopefully you can see that on there, just to show that accidents do happen. So I thought this batten was wet, so it would be able to drive the screw straight through without pre-drilling, but as I'm putting the screw in near the end and I've done it without pre-drilling, it's split the wood. So now we're going to pre-drill the other holes and put them in, and then hopefully nothing will split. Now I've pre-drilled up the batten with a little fine drill, and I've now put the 40mm screws in, just driven them in through the batten just till they bite on the back lap panel. And now I'm going to turn the panel over and fix it to the other batten. Once you've screwed the batten on to the one side, flip the board over and then screw this other batten to this other side. If you alternate the screws between the one side and the other, then you'll hopefully get a better fix. So I'll pre-drill these about every 30 centimetres and then put the 40mm screws in. Having now screwed the batten in tightly, it's now makes a better edge to saw against with the handsaw. So we'll try that method. If anybody tells you it's quieter living in the country, don't believe them. Get harangued by lawnmowers, sheep, hedge trimmers, noisy hedgehogs, noisy frogs, but we love it really. So now we're going to try and cut this and give you a better idea of how it cuts, having had the battens put either side, which stops these laps from moving about, and it helps the saw to cut more easily. So here we go again. Got my gloves on now just in case I slip, but then we'll try and saw this through. As you see, it's flopping around on this outer edge, but on the inner edge it's quite nice and tight, so it does make it a lot easier. And you've also got a guide here to cut alongside, which keeps it more accurate. Just go gently on because there's no particular race. There we are. It's quite a neatly cut edge, and hopefully that measurement is the 80 centimetres that we require. The key is to get your new battens that you put in either side, make sure that they are absolutely accurately positioned, because otherwise you'll end up cutting through the length of the grain of the wood, which will slow the process down a lot. But certainly by screwing the two battens together to trap the laps, it makes it a lot easier to saw. Now this time we've positioned the batten in the appropriate position for the width of panel we want, and we're going to use that batten as a guide to use the power saw. So we'll just use the power saw along the edge of that batten, and then hopefully jobs are good on. So now with the electricity disconnected from the power saw, adjust the depth between there and the saw, so it's just slightly wider, deeper than the thickest part of the timber you're going to saw through, and then you should get a pretty good cut. When you're using the power saw, on most saws there are two grooves at the front there. You can just see, I'll take my glove away, just behind there, two grooves. The one there says 0 degrees, the other says 45 degrees. The 0 degrees one is the one you use when you're doing a straight level cut, and if you're doing an angle cut at 45 degrees, then you use this side. The 45 degree edge is your marker to go up against your line you've drawn. Now on the 0 degree one, it's that left hand edge of the gap that is shows the position of the saw. Pre-drill and screw your batten to the desired width that you want for your lap panel, then set up your power saw and away we go. And there I'm using that little line marker at the front that I showed you to line it up with the edge, the right hand edge of the batten, which is the maximum width of the fence panel that we require. There you are, it's the finished article, which didn't take very long at all. As you can see, it's just slightly wider there, so just have to be a bit careful when you're running the saw up the batten, just to make sure you get it absolutely spot on, and then you've got the size that you require. Hopefully you can see on the corner here how the edge of these panels is sometimes a bit inaccurate, so as I say, the best thing is to measure from the widest part of the edge that you're keeping to the correct distance on the edge of the batten you're putting into position. So I now put that into position on this back side of the panel at our 40 centimetre mark from the widest part as we measured from on the other side. Measure the width of the panel that you want to create measuring from the widest part of the edge that you're not cutting, because they do vary quite a lot because it's not a precise science because it's wood. And so we're going to go from there. This time we're going to go for 40 centimetres. So we mark 40 centimetres at this end, and then 40 centimetres at the other end, and then another mark 40 centimetres about the centre of the panel, and then draw a line between them using the batten you've prepared earlier. And then you should have a pretty good straight line. The battens sometimes can be a bit, they can bow a bit, so it's sometimes better to do it with a 6 foot or so metal spirit level if you have one. Now, having measured your 40 centimetres, place that on the panel and just double check that it's accurate, and then I sometimes find it useful to hold that together with a couple of these solo clamps, which just happen to be here. These solo clamps or one-handed clamps are really quite good. because it just means you can hold everything in place tightly whilst you screw and pre-drill and screw the buttons. Yeah. That helps you to hold your buttons, the top and the bottom button together on your 40cm line, and they do the same at the other end. So now that you've checked the width at the top and the bottom and the middle are 40cm or whatever your desired measurement is, then you can start to pre-drill and screw, in this case with 40mm screws, basically a screw that's not going to protrude beyond the batten on the other side. If it is, then you just need something slightly thinner, slightly shorter. Got the circular saw set up to the correct depth, so it's just slightly deeper than the thickest part of the wood we're going to cut through, and then we'll just follow the line of the new batten that we've put in at our 40cm spacing. That's been cut through quite nicely now with the circular saw. It's just a little bit proud by about maybe 3 or 4mm. So moral behind that is just to take the saw in just slightly more, just do a little test run, and then you can always pass it over again and just take it in slightly more, just to take off that last little bit if necessary.